Scylla and Charybdis. We rowed on downriver, helped by the wind. We could barely make out the murky outlines of the river bank, and the only sound was the regular splash of the oars. On and on we rowed, through the dank gloom. It seemed like ages before we pulled out of ocean into the open sea. The Mediterranean night came as a relief after the everlasting night of Hades. The full moon threw a pool of soft golden light across the water, and 1,000 bright stars studded the sky. Now at last we could relax, and my men rested their oars and lay back exhausted. I sat at the helm while my men slept. A steady southerly wind filled the sails and blew us on our way. With only the moon and stars for company, my mind turned back to the unhappy spirits of the dead. I wept for the souls of my lost comrades, and above all for my dear mother. Toward morning, when my tears ran dry, my thoughts moved on to the voyage to come. It was a weary prospect. After all we had been through, we were still as far away as ever from Ithaca, our home. We sailed on through that night and most of the following day. It was early evening by the time we reached Aeana, and Circe and her maids were looking out for us on the beach. They had brought us food, and we devoured greedily, and fragrant wine to wash it down. Afterwards, Circe took my hand and led me down the beach. "I want to talk with you alone," she said, "for you must leave at dawn, and there are many things you need to know." We walked to the edge of the pine forest above the beach, and sat down in the shade of the trees. I breathed in the deep, heady scent of pine resin and rested my eyes on Circe's lovely face. She hesitated before she spoke, and I sensed that she wanted to ask me to stay. In all honesty, I cannot swear that I would have refused. But the moment passed. When the goddess spoke, it was not of love, but of dangers yet to come. Tiresias, it seemed, had only told me half of the story. Circe's soft words told me the rest. "Dear Odysseus," she began, "unlucky man, the jealous gods will grant you no peace. You have returned unscathed from grim Hades' house only to face even greater trials. Listen carefully and promise to do exactly as I say." The goddess took my hand in hers and made me swear this solemnly to the great gods and to everything dear to me. Then she went on, "Dear Odysseus, your voyage home will be more perilous than any battle on the dusty plains of Troy. Vengeful Poseidon is determined to destroy you, and the other gods will do nothing to stop him. Since Zeus has forbidden it, even if Athena cannot help you. Once you leave from these shores, you are on your own. From Aea you must steer due south. The north wind will carry you along. Toward evening you will come to the island of Sirens, 3 cruel enchantresses whose sweet song is irresistible to men. They will implore you to come ashore, but once you are ashore you are lost. Their heavenly song will turn to hideous shrieks as they tear your flesh apart. I will give you special wax to block your ears, for if you are deaf to their music you will be safe. Once past the Sirens, you will sail on undisturbed until you approach the straits that divide the northern part of Trinithica. The Hyperion keeps his golden cattle from the mainland. Here you will have to make a choice. If you avoid the straits and sail straight to the west coast of Trinithica, you will come to the Wanderers, a field of huge rocks scattered across the water. From a distance, few sights could look more inviting. Glistening in the sun, the deep blue rocks appear to float on the surface of the turquoise sea. The water is deep and as smooth as a mirror, and there is room between the rocks for easy navigation. Very close, however, the picture changes. Once a ship comes within range, the rock turns gray and craggy. An icy wind whistles among them over the turbulent sea, and black clouds mass overhead. The rocks themselves begin to move, slowly at first, heaving and swaying from side to side, while deep groans like distant thunder drag themselves up from the bottom of the sea. Then the rocks move faster and faster until they are hurtled around and crash together. Any ship would be smashed apart in the chaos. It would be suicide to go that way. So you must enter the straits, where you will pass between 2 faithful cliffs. One of them towers into the sky, the other is about half its size. An enormous fig tree grows straight out from the smaller cliff. It's a strange sight, but don't be tempted to look closer. An awesome monster, Charybdis, wallows in the seabed there. 3 times a day she stretches her vast tentacles out and swirls the water around and then sucks it greedily down, devouring whatever the whirlpool brings her. Halfway up the taller cliff, you'll see the entrance to a cave. Deep in its foul recesses lives a hideous sea hag, Scylla. Scylla has 12 legs and 6 monstrous heads. She sits in her own filth, whining and yelping like a puppy, waiting for her prey. She will certainly seize a man with each of her gruesome heads as you pass by. Nevertheless, I urge you to go that way. Much better to lose 6 men than to risk losing your ship and all of your lives. Finally, remember what Tiresias told you, and avoid the Thriny Sea altogether. If you are forced to go ashore there, then whatever you do, be sure to leave Hyperion sheep and cattle alone. Otherwise you will lose your ship and your men and maybe even your life. Circe squeezed my hand for the last time. Tears glistened on her cheek as she turned away from me, and without another word she hurried off through the trees. The sky was already reddening in the east, and my men were stirring up on the beach. We loaded the supplies that Circe had given us and set out to sea once more. As the goddess had foretold, there was a north wind to carry us along, and soon we had left the island of Aea far behind. Now I repeated Circe's somber warnings to my men, although I did not tell them about Scylla. If there was nothing we could do to avoid her, then it would only have caused unnecessary alarm. We sailed on through the day, and toward the evening the island of the Sirens loomed over the horizon. I took the ball of soft wax that Circe had given me out of its leather pouch and began plugging my crew's ears. When I had finished, I shouted to test my work. Not one of them heard me. Then I got my men to lash me to the masts and waited nervously as we approached the island. We were still a long way off when the first strains of the Sirens' heavenly song drifted enticingly across the water. "Noble Odysseus," they sang, "greatest of the Greeks, destroyer of Troy, come stay with us and listen to our song. No one who hears it can resist our music. The memory of it will stay with you until the end of your days. Come ashore, Odysseus, and we will sing as we have never sung before." I was instantly seduced by the sweet sound of their voices, drunk on the nectar of their song. If strong ropes had not held me, then Circe's warnings would have counted for nothing. I was desperate to go ashore, but my men were deaf to my frenzied screams. They gazed unmoved at the furious contortions of my face and rowed steadily on. But now we had sailed close to the island, where the 3 Sirens sat on cliffs and watched us approach. They were as beautiful as their voices, which when we drew closer became unbearably lovely. I struggled to escape until their ropes bit into my flesh, convinced now that Circe had tricked me. She had not been worried about my safety at all. It was jealousy that made her want to keep me from the Sirens. But it was not long before I was brought to my senses with a jolt. The cliff on which the Sirens sat formed a part of a narrow headland that now began to skirt. As soon as the Sirens realized that they were not coming ashore, a hideous change came over them. The beautiful young woman turned into terrifying hags, half woman and half vulture, and instead of their sweet song, a stream of ugly shrieks cursed and filled the air. Once we had rounded the headland, the horrible sound faded behind us, and my men untied me and unblocked their ears. As they asked me to describe the music that had me so bewitched, but before I had time to reply, we were all silenced by the horrible sight that now met our eyes. We were sailing down the east side of the headland, past a small sandy beach backed by huge cliffs. A line of jagged rocks lurked menacingly right beneath the surface of the sea, and the beach was piled high and with whitened bones. At the top of the pile lay the Sirens' most recent victims, covered in dark stains. Thousands of skeletons beneath them had been bleached by the sun and salt water. We were sickened by the sight of what might have been our fate, and thankful to leave the gruesome place behind. Now we had made good progress. The wind was still with us, the twilight sky was clear, and the sea was calm. We sailed on through the night, taking turns to keep watch and steer. Refreshed by sleep and encouraged by our swift progress, my crew were in a hopeful mood when morning came. It did not last long. The sun was still rising when we saw the straits ahead of us in the distance. We could see the wanderers away to our right, and as Circe had described them, glistening in the sun. We entered the straits, and before long the faithful cliffs of Scylla and Charybdis came into view. The 2 cliffs stood across from each other at the narrowest point of straits. At first they looked harmless enough, but closer to them the large area of water in front of the small cliff appeared to be simmering. Soon the water began streaming and turning around until a huge whirlpool formed where Charybdis sucked the water down. My men froze in terror as ship was drawn to the edge. For the God's sake, row before it's too late, I screamed, barely in time. The ship was slowly beginning to turn before we steered clear. We had escaped from Charybdis, but only into the shadow of the larger cliff. I could see the entrance halfway up the rock, but no sound came from the cave. Perhaps Scylla was asleep, and we could get away unscathed. Suddenly, there was a thunderous boom across the water. We turned to see a towering fountain rise up as Charybdis blew the whirlpool out. While our backs were turned and the spray from the fountain fell on our cheeks, ghastly yelping broke out in the midst. The Scylla's 6 heads, all fangs, foul breath, and matted hair, were among us and seized 6 of our crew. They wriggled helplessly in her ugly mouths as she pulled in her scaly necks. Then she devoured them alive on the ledge outside of her cave, yelping and whining hideously the entire time. There was nothing we could do, and in our sick hearts we rowed away from the cliffs. Now I was determined to sail on until we had left the straits of death far behind us. I thought we would then be sure of a safe passage home. I did not realize that our greatest trial was still to come.